I'm just messing with you because it's my time frame is different from all of y'all's.
Okay, well, we are live. Hang on, let's do the. Okay, now there you go. Good evening and welcome to the Haunted Library. This is a work in progress, obviously. Tonight, our topic of conversation is one that, as writers, if we were to try to write fictionalized accounts of this stuff, nobody'd believe it.
No.
It's too far fetched. The people are too whacked out. They're just not believable. And yet, it happens all the time. There are hundreds of cults currently active within the United States and worldwide. They're all over the place. Now, not all of them are as bad as the ones we're going to discuss today, but this is some really dark stuff we're talking about. So if you're have a weak constitution, you might want to miss this one. In any case, to begin with, I'll start with one that's not quite as dark as the other ones, and it's called Heaven's Gate. If you remember the bald-headed guy who never seemed to blink, that was a guy named Marshall Applewhite, and he began this cult with a lady friend of his named Bonnie Nettles. And the two of them were known together as T and Doe, which makes me wonder if they were like singing songs from Mary Poppins. I don't know. But their basic belief was that human beings began their life in the kingdom of God, which was an actual place somewhere out there in space. And the UFOs were like emissaries of that original race. And that they would, if they prepared themselves properly, rose their souls to the next level, they would then be picked up by the spaceship when it came, and they would ascend to utopia or whatever it was. And this went on, as a lot of these cults do, for quite a few years with T and Doe saying, well, you know what's coming. The spaceship's going to be here anytime now. Yep, anytime now. Well, 2 years from now. Well, okay, maybe another couple of years. And it went on like this for about 20 years almost. Well, about 15, 16 years before T died. And it really shook the foundations of their philosophical belief. This wasn't a church per se. It was just, they all believed that they were going to be picked up by aliens one day and be brought to the kingdom of heaven or whatever. So unlike the rest of the cults we're going to discuss today, these guys were relatively benign. There wasn't violence involved.
Yeah,
there wasn't even sex involved. These people were actually celibate. In fact, they all got their haircuts to be completely
asexual,
androgynous. Yeah,
androgynous,
and completely androgynous. That was the whole idea. And then T died. So Marshall Applewhite then decided that in her dying was her soul ascending to this higher plane. She had just she'd just gotten rid of her, what they called the vessel, which was their bodies, and her soul had ascended and she found another way to go up in space or something. To rational human beings who did not buy into this stuff, it makes no sense whatsoever. But to the people who actually believed it, it made perfect sense, apparently. Several years went by, and he started talking about the way to get to the kingdom of heaven was to lose their vessel, was to strip away their vessel and let their souls ascend. So he slowly started talking them into suicide, which ultimately he wanted to do because he was utterly heartbroken at T's death. He was inconsolable, and he just kept going further and further and further down that rabbit hole and bringing them with him. And then the Hale-Bopp comet arrived, and there was this mass that seemed to be following in the tail of Hale-Bopp. Nobody was really sure what it was, except for the people of Heaven's Gate. So the day that it was, I guess, the most visible or whatever, the closest to the Earth, they all committed suicide. They wore the same exact black uniforms with a patch that said away team on it. They all had brand new Nikes, and in every one of their pockets, they carried a $5 bill and 3 quarters. Who knows why? But Applewhite and 38 other people committed suicide in San Diego in March of 1997. This was, I mean, as, you know,
drugs, alcohol, and a bag over your head.
Well, yeah, sitting outside of this, it's impossible for us to understand it. But these people were true believers. They believed that it was going to work. They all made goodbye tapes, and they all seemed delighted about the fact that they were good. Their souls were going to ascend and be picked up on the spaceship. It makes no sense in the rational light of day, but to them it made perfect sense. And that, in essence, is what these cults do. They convince people, possibly of things they want to be convinced of, probably the things they want to be convinced of. But they convince people to do these bizarre things. Jonestown's the perfect example. Almost 900 people. But I'll quit flapping my gums for a moment, say hello to Landa Saldana, and Facebook user for the people up there on Facebook. There is a link at the top of there's a link at the top of where it's posted in either Asylum of Fear or or Coffee and Holes. There's a link for StreamYard. If you click on that, it'll give it permission. Your name will pop up. Otherwise, we'll just call you Racer X or something. Clarence Cecil Fletcher is the one who said howdy to us. So.
We'll just call Facebook users Cultist 1, Cultist
2. So anyway, Scott.
They could always talk like I did last.
Anyway, Scott has another cult he'd like to talk about. So
I just wanted to also add to what you were saying. One of the differences between the Heaven's Gate cult and any other cult, Jamestown, the Branch Davidians, was they all did it willingly. Mm-hmm. Whereas even in Jamestown, there were a few that drank the Kool-Aid, wholeheartedly. A lot of them had to drink it at the end of a gun. Mm-hmm. This was one of those few cults where everybody was like, yes, we're going to do this. And I always imagine to myself, someday I'm going to get abducted by a spaceship, and all 39 of them are going to be there to greet me. Then it's going to be like, damn, you were right.
Oh shit!
Can I have some Kool-Aid?
Yeah,
We're going to be
particular
talking a
one-
lot about cults, and we're going to be talking about those that sexual perversions, those that are trying to steal money from you, all that stuff. The one that bothered me the most, and I know this because during my tenure with the CIA, I spent a few years doing chemical and biological weapons. And the one that always just sort of terrified me was the Japanese doomsday cult, Aum Shinrikyo. And I don't know if you remember them, but they were the ones that launched the sarin gas attack in the Tokyo subway on New Year's Day, 1995. That was the one that shut down the system, killed 13 people, hospitalized 54, and sent almost 1,000 to the hospital. Which honestly, they lucked out with those numbers, because sarin gas is one of a tiny bottle of sarin gas, the size of like a D battery. If you could distribute it through the air ducts of an American aircraft carrier properly, would wipe out the entire crew. So the fact that only 13 people died, but it was a doomsday cult. And this cult believed that they would reach nirvana when the doomsday hit. But unlike some cults that waited for the end, waited for the rocket ship to come by, they thought if they could expedite doomsday, if they could get the world in total disorder, their rise to nirvana would be earlier. And we all know them for the sarin attack, but when I was doing some research on them, they were involved in other attacks. One Aum Shinrikyo guy drove a car through a crowd of people, killing 3. There were numerous arrests for assault, for attempted murder. And of course, behind the religious aspects of it, we're doing this, for the God or gods almighty. There was a vast financial empire, massive corruption, not paying of taxes, draining people's bank accounts. And if I remember correctly, sexual perversion at the top of the ranks that was just, make some of what goes on in Hollywood seem tame by comparison. So, I mean, we've got here the two extremes. We've got that, for lack of a better word, forgive me, the harmless cult that, gave people happiness. I mean, yeah, they're dead. It's sad they're dead, but they died happy. They thought they were believing in something. Then you got the other extreme, the Aum Shinrikyo, who their cult followers want to wreak as much havoc, death, and destruction on the world as they can. And that scares the living hell out of me, because you can easily make most of these chemical weapons in your basement, in your garage. Any group like this with just a minimal amount of money and 1 or 2 chemists in the group could do the same thing anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's frightening.
I think that was and to my knowledge, that was the only cult that ever brought its death and destruction outside of its own ranks. There
was one other.
Oh, which one?
It was the cult of Yahweh, the Church of Yahweh. It was a black militant sect in Miami. And this guy I wrote this down, his original name was, let me see. I've got like 7-8 pages of notes on these psycho hose beasts. Okay. Let me see. I don't know. He changed his name to Yahweh Ben Yahweh. And anybody who challenged his authority, he bumped them off. He killed them. And they did not kill them nicely.
Mhm.
They were like taking ball peen hammers to them and chopping them into little bits and making it completely public. So yeah, the Japanese cult wasn't the only one that was
Okay.
outside, but that is very rare,
Yeah.
thankfully. Well, then there's always Manson. The Manson family was a cult.
Yeah. No, you're
Yeah.
right. You're right.
That qualifies as a cult.
It qualifies as a cult.
Now, Charlie used hallucinogenic
Yeah.
drugs.
Mhm.
And he isolated
make
the
a real-
members, and they were fed a nonstop diet of Charlie. But it was a cult,
Yeah.
so they were violent, sick bastards.
Did anybody do any research to see?
Yeah.
Is there any like official count how many cults there are today?
Well, let's
Let me
check.
look.
Let's check
I'll
that.
take a look.
Okay, that bastion of all misinformation,
Most of them are not.
Wikipedia probably has something on it.
Like a,
Anyway, I found the three major cults I found stuff about was the Children of God, the Jonestown, the people of Jonestown, the People's Temple,
Yeah.
and Nexium, which is the only one that really isn't religious at all. Chassis Meme showed up. Hello. There was one other one called the Tony Alamo Ministries. Yeah, this was
I didn't know that.
the Tony Alamo Ministries. This guy Tony Alamo, who was charismatic, and that seems to be the key to all of it. You have a charismatic leader. He used systematic indoctrination with threats of corporal punishment. That's how he kept his people in line. And he decided that the legal age of marriage was puberty, according to the Bible. This is what he decided. Not surprisingly, he ended up with like a half a dozen child brides.
Mhm.
Until they finally arrested his ass and threw it in jail for the rest of his life. But compared to some of these other guys, he was actually kind of, gross. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Wait till I get to the Children of God. Those.
I looked it up. According to a 2018 study,
Mhm.
there were 10,000 cults in the United States.
I believe it.
That's not including the other Americas, Europe, Asia, the Middle East.
I believe it.
Well, a lot of them overlap from country to country too.
Yeah.
Do you know that? So
Now the worst ones, and this may be because
they
of longevity, but the worst ones seem to begin around the late 60s, early 70s, which makes a certain kind of sense because back then there were a lot of people who were searching for themselves. The 60s, and I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1961, so I was a kid in the 60s. And because I was a kid in the 60s, I actually remember it. Unlike some of my older friends. But Coming out of the war years and coming out of the 50s were all about conformism, to conforming to normal standards. Better Dead Than Red, I Like Ike, The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, everybody, the Dustin Hoffman movie, The Graduate, was all about that.
Yeah.
You got a good job, you got into some kind of business, and you kept your nose to the grindstone. You had the white picket fence and the 2.5 children, and that was what was expected of you. And then the 60s rolled around, and as usually happens with society, there was blowback from that. It had been so repressive for so long that the 60s came along and people just said, nope. We're going completely to the other extreme. And that's what happened. You had the Flower Children and the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, and all these other movements that were basically just young people trying to figure out what their place was in this newly changing world. And a lot of them ended up in California, the Haight-Ashbury, the Summer of Love, all of that. That's where Manson picked his up. That's where Jim Jones actually started in Ohio, and then moved out to California, north of the Bay Area. Angel Ramon showed up.
Hey, Angel.
So there was a lot of this going around at that time. And it may be that the bad stuff that we know about it because there was such a long period of time that it existed. A lot of these 10,000 cults that are in existence now are probably fairly new. You've got a lot of the new age, crystals, hippy dippy, let's do yoga till we drop, kind of, completely benign people searching for something more. You've got priests that are molesting children and fundamentalist religious Christians that are just, God hates fags and all this other stuff that just doesn't quite fit with their personal philosophy. So they're trying to find something else to believe in. But Jones, for example, everybody knows about Jonestown. Yeah. It's hard to miss.
Said he was a mastermind
of 900 bodies laying on the ground.
But honestly, how many of our fans out there, younger fans? I mean, I remember watching it. I was fascinated, watching the shooting at the airport. Nobody knows. The past generation never even, I mentioned it to my daughter a couple of days. She looked at me like, what's Jamestown? Who's Jim Jones? It's forgotten.
Does she know David Koresh in Waco?
No.
Wow. That's actually kind of disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, she knows Manson because, how can you not? Sadly, he was still an icon up to his death.
Yeah, that's true.
He was constantly,
even after his death.
Yeah. I don't think anybody.
Well, that's what all these are that we've talked about.
Go ahead, Susan.
No, I just said all these major ones that we're talking about are still recognized to this day.
Yeah.
And we would probably be surprised at how many people actually look them up and continue to follow their mandates, I guess you could say. Because look at how we're talking here. They don't have to go anywhere to look it up. They can just do it all online.
Well, yeah, but we're old. But yeah, Waco is kind of, if you look close to Waco, that's what it's most famous for.
Yeah.
It's the Branch Davidians and David Koresh. And that was In some cases, it was a tragedy. In others, it was inevitable. The ATF and the FBI made serious mistakes.
Yeah.
But David Koresh egged it on. David Koresh was the one who decided that it was going to end the way it did.
Yeah.
For those of you who aren't familiar with Waco and the Branch Davidians and what happened, David Koresh created a fundamentalist doomsday cult, essentially, gathered them all in Waco, Texas. They were called the Branch Davidians. And he was preparing for the end times by stockpiling weapons that he was buying illegally, including automatic weapons, which were not legal. The ATF decided to try and bust them one day, but the raid that they performed on the Branch Davidian Church was busted from the beginning. It was a bust from the very beginning. They should have never made that raid because the Branch Davidians knew they were coming. And they showed up and they started shooting at each other, which was bad. The FBI and the ATF generally don't like being shot at. And the government tends to get testy when their agencies are under fire. The FBI and the ATF escalated things, and it was essentially a siege. They were using, military hardware that you routinely see in, like Afghanistan. Yeah. And it just kept getting worse and kept getting worse and kept getting worse. And they finally said enough is enough, broke into the place, shot some smoke canisters in there, and all of a sudden the building burst into flames. And it killed, I don't know, it was over 100 people, I think. A lot of children were involved.
A lot of children, yeah.
But the thing was, Koresh, they had been negotiating with Koresh for weeks. And he had said, okay, this is what I want. And they would give it to him. And he'd renege on his promise to let people go, to let the kids come out. Then he'd say, I want this now. So they'd give it to him. And he'd renege again. Then he'd say, this is what I want. And they'd give it to him, and they reneged again. And finally they said, screw you, we're coming in. And that's when the place burst into flames. The general consensus is that Koresh and his people started the fire themselves.
Yeah.
That it wasn't the ATF or the FBI. It wasn't set off by a smoke bomb. It was set off by David Koresh.
Mm-hmm.
So these people it was bad all the way around. It should have never happened, but you can't forget, it's easy to be pissed at the government, but you can't forget that David Koresh is the one that really did it.
Well, the one thing that I remember being in the government at the time was, and I don't know the policy, I don't know how David Koresh handled himself, was why didn't they just wait for David Koresh to leave the compound? My understanding was he left, he did business trips, arrest him when he wasn't there. Without the leader, everybody else falls apart, gives themselves up. The FBI, ATF look good for a change.
Hello, McFly. I don't know.
It was also, and I'm not saying anything bad about either one, it didn't help that it started at the end of one administration and began and then ended at the beginning of the other. There was no continuity of what was going on. That was just, it was a Charlie Foxtrot.
Oh, big time. It was screwed from the get-go.
Yeah. From
the jump, it was screwed. But then you've got something like Jonestown. Jonestown was, Jim Jones was this preacher, again, very charismatic, He began his ministry which was called, was it the Jones Ministry? No, what the hell was the name of it?
Can't remember.
You're not talking the People's Temple, are you?
The People's Temple. The People's Temple.
Yeah.
It was called the People's Temple. And Jones at first was, from all indications, a really good guy. He was doing a lot of community service.
Yeah.
He was setting up soup kitchens. He was giving food to the needy. He set up nursing homes for the elderly. He did a lot of really good stuff.
And he was a huge supporter of racial integration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, he did a lot of it. Started out, this guy was like the thing. He was the real deal.
Yeah. He was your 1960s hero. He was your idol. Everybody like, wow, this guy's doing what should be done.
Unfortunately, he was also completely insane. I believe he actually had a brain tumor. There was some kind of lesion on his brain because he suffered from severe migraine headaches and eventually started taking drugs for those. And then, of course, taking more drugs and more drugs and more drugs. So his preaching began to get more and more and more extreme. He finally decided that they should just go away. They should find some isolated place where they could be free and not have to deal with all the extra stuff that was happening. They first tried someplace in the United States. I'm not sure where it was. I think it was someplace.
I think, didn't they?
What's that? What's that?
I think they moved like 3 times. You know, the third time was when they wound up over
in Guyana,
where they were at, where he killed all the people. Yeah, I think it was 3 times all total.
Yeah, something they
nuts.
kept trying to build their own solo commune.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they finally ended up in Guyana. They bought a piece of property out in the middle of nowhere, Guyana. They set up a commune that was a farm, and it was, supposedly utopia. Well, underlying utopia was Jim Jones' insanity. He kept these people docile by working them into the ground. They were working 11 to 18 hours a day in, day out, every day. And then spending hours and hours and hours listening to this guy preach when the workday was over. So they were completely sleep deprived.
He had a loudspeakers. He would do it all hours of the day, all hours of the night, so that they would hear him regardless of where they were, day or night.
Yeah. And he would just go on and on and on and on. And again, they were cut off from the rest of the world. It was just them, all isolated. And he did what a lot of these cults end up doing is he convinced the people to divest themselves of their family, cut themselves off from their families because the families were going to be keeping them tied to the material world, which was bad. And yeah, that was the basic idea. So finally, a congressman from California by the name of,
I think it was Leo Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, that is correct. He went down there to investigate accusations that people were being held against their will. And he went down there with a team and a couple of airplanes. And at first, everything seemed great because Jones threw them a dog and pony show. He showed them that, yep, everything is great. Nobody wants to leave. Everybody's happy. Well, as the day progressed, slowly but surely, people started sidling up to the congressman and saying, yeah, we want to get the hell out of here. And they ended up leaving with, I think it was 18 people. It may have been
right. Yeah.
It may have been more than that. Well, 33 people.
Wow.
33 people. And they piled into this wagon that was pulled by a truck, and they headed out to the airstrip that was some miles away. And Jones gave every indication that he was going to let them leave. Well, once they got to the airport, all of a sudden, another truck shows up, dragging another wagon, this time filled with armed men, who got alongside the plane and opened fire on them. Several people were killed, including the congressman.
Mhm.
One of the planes actually took off and got away. The other one didn't. And they killed a lot of those people. A couple of people survived. A couple of people managed to run into the jungle and didn't get killed, but the congressman did, which is, obviously bad. The federal government really doesn't like it when their congressman gets shot. Imagine that.
Because nowadays it depends on which congressman. So
yeah. So now Jim Jones tells the people in Jonestown that they are in a no-win situation. It didn't help that he was the one who created the no-win situation, but they were in a no-win situation, and the only way that they could address this no-win situation was something he called revolutionary suicide. And he had been slowly but surely indoctrinating him with that idea for months, to the point where they had even had suicide drills leading up to this. So, he kills off the congressman. He sets up this no-win situation, and it was. As soon as people heard about it, they were coming. There was no question. They weren't going to get away with what they'd just done. So the heat was going to come down. So he said, we're in this no-win situation. The only way out is revolutionary suicide. So he set up Kool-Aid, big vats of, it wasn't actually Kool-Aid. It was some kind of, sugar drink with hydrogen cyanide mixed in, and said, okay, time to drink. And people did. Not all of them willingly.
yeah.
A lot of them were basically forced to drink the Kool-Aid, which is where that expression comes from, at the point of a gun. 900 people died that day. 900. That was Jonestown.
And 304 of them were children.
Yes. That was Jonestown. Mm-hmm. So that was another one of those. That's probably the most famous one, other than, the Manson family.
Yeah.
But sitting on the outside, it's tough for us to understand how it happened, but there is historical precedent for it. And by that, I'm referring to Nazi Germany.
Mm-hmm.
There was 11 million people in Nazi Germany? No, it was actually more than that. It was like 30 million.
You talking about Nazis or Germans?
In Germany, there was like 30 million people before the Second World War started. It was. I think it was like 30 million. I think it was like 3 times the population of France at the time.
I've got here The population in June 1933 was 65 million people in Germany.
Okay, so I was wrong. There was a lot more people, but it was more. It was like 3 times, 4 times as many people as they had in France. And the Nazis, at the end of the First World War, the Allies, primarily the French, hit Germany so hard for reparations and punitive damages and et cetera, at the end of the First World War that it was literally impossible for them to succeed as a nation. It was impossible.
Oh, yeah.
And the German people were looking for somebody to blame for their lot in life. Because, of course, they couldn't blame themselves. That's never going to happen. So they blamed at first communists and, undesirables and intellectuals and liberals and, the usual. And then, of course, they happened upon the ultimate scapegoat, the Jews. Because Hitler and people like him were just absolute anti-Semites.
And it also, it had struck a chord with a lot of middle class, or I don't want to say non-educated, but with your average German, because so many of the socialist politicians and communist politicians who were advocating policies that the German people didn't like just happened to be Jewish themselves. So it was so easy for Hitler, to talk about the Jews and the communists, the Jews and the socialists.
Yep. Yep. And they taught the German people, slowly but surely, using propaganda in a way that had never been used before, to convince this population of 65 million or whatever it was that what they were doing was a good idea. They should hate the Jews. They should just get rid of the Jews. They should get rid of the communists. They should get rid of all of these subversive elements and instead embrace the true Aryan bloodline. Well, at a certain point, of course, the people of Germany, the average people of Germany, finally woke up to the fact that these guys are nuts.
Yeah, when we were bombing their city.
Well, that had something to do with it. I'm just saying.
Shit, we're losing this war. Get rid of Hitler.
I know. But they wouldn't have gotten to that position, and Hitler wouldn't have gotten into the position he got into if not for the consent of the German people.
That's what scares me the most about Nazi Germany. I've studied communism. I've studied Nazism. Almost every communist state was the same. It was a bunch of thugs, led by thugs, with even less educated thugs under them, taking control and scaring the population. You're with us or you're dead.
Yeah.
Germany was so different. Germany was a charismatic leader. Yes, he had the SA, the thugs, but so many people followed him like a cultist. It wasn't the poor. It wasn't the uneducated. It wasn't those unemployed. He was supported by Henry Ford, Walt Disney, the leading German industrialists. Lindbergh, the Kennedy there, Joseph Kennedy. Albert Speer was, to me, the prime example. A smart, well-educated, moralistic man who wanted to be part of this so bad that he joined up. And then when he got to the point when he was in charge of the economy, rather than say, I'm not going to use Jewish slave labor, he used them by the millions, killing off hundreds of thousands of them. That's what scares me, because I see that a little bit today.
Yes, I know.
Smart people standing behind certain leaders, and I'm saying that because I see it on both sides, who don't listen to the fact, and they're willing to say, I hear it all the time. If you're unvaccinated, die. It scares me, because if it could happen in Germany, the fact that it even hints at happening again shows that people don't learn from history.
No, there was actually, ironically, it was a German philosopher by the name of Hegel who said, we learn from history that we do not learn from history. And that is so true.
I used to tell my students, those who do not learn from history have failed to repeat it. And some of you will be in summer school.
That is very true.
Yeah.
That is very, very true.
No, I mean, I agree completely. Nazi Germany was a cult. And I mean, when you look at it, the Nuremberg rallies, Leni Riefenstahl, those movies are, even if you're not a Nazi supporter, those movies are just mesmerizing for the cinematography in them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, the Triumph of the Will.
Yes.
Was an incredible piece of movie making, which incidentally, I believe it's still banned from public viewing in Germany today.
Probably.
They won't even allow it to be watched, which I don't blame them. But this was propaganda on a grand scale.
Yeah.
And people, they drank the Kool-Aid for a while.
Yeah.
For a while. But there's an old saying, I think the guy who said it was a man named Heydrich van Loon or something like that, who said, first they came for the intellectuals, but I wasn't one of those, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
Then they came for the Jews, but I wasn't one of those, so I didn't say anything. Yeah. Then they came for the Catholics, but I was a Protestant, so I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then they came to me. And by then, nobody was left to say anything.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how it happened. It was all about coercion. And in this case, it was coercion on a national scale.
Yeah.
But which brings me to NXIVM. It's probably the most recent example of one of these cults. It's not religious-based. It's pronounced NXIVM. That's how it's spelled. NXIVM. God only knows why they called it NXIVM, but that's what it was. It was created by this guy named Keith Raniere, the self-named smartest man in the world, who claimed to have an IQ of 240. Okay, he was a smart guy. He had multiple degrees in, I had this written down, math, biology, and genetics. IQ of 240. He was a concert pianist. The guy had skills, but he also started out with essentially a Ponzi scheme called what is it? Bicorp. Let me see. Yeah, it's called. Well, yes, Consumers Byline, it was called.
Oh.
He was busted, told to pay a $40,000 fine, and told never to do it again. Bad capitalist. So he turned around and created this thing called executive. Let me see. Executive. Lots and lots of notes. Executive Success Program, ESP. It was a professional development course that turned into a very serious cult. And Alan finally showed up.
Sorry, it's been a crazy day.
He's been preparing Kool-Aid for his followers.
That's it. That's it. And they will be drinking it at the end of the day. But
Nice.
yeah. But this
Ooh,
guy
I like that shirt.
Yeah, I figured you would. This guy Rainier was a narcissistic sociopath. He had zero empathy. He had zero moral compass. He manipulated people into essentially what it was an executive development program that if you followed its precepts, it also helped you in your personal life. That was the way it was pitched. And people would sign up for these seminars that were anything from $300 for the seminar to $10,000. And here's a list of some of the people who signed up for this program. Richard Branson, Jennifer Aniston, the daughter of the president of Mexico. Let me see who else. I wrote it down here. Allison Mack, who was on
Angel or Buffy or something, right?
it was Smallville.
Oh, Smallville.
It was on Smallville. Grace Park from Battlestar Galactica. Nikki Klein from Battlestar Galactica. Linda Evans, Wonder Woman, signed up for this shit.
No,
Yeah.
not Linda Evans. Linda Carter.
Linda Carter, that's true.
Linda Carter, yeah.
Linda Evans was Dallas.
Dallas. Yeah, it may have been
yeah.
Dallas. It may have been Dallas.
And the Big Valley.
The Seagram, the heiresses to the Seagram fortune. Claire and Sarah Bronjman, or however you pronounce their last name.
They were big behind that too. If I
They were the bank.
Yeah.
They were the bank. They got it bankrolled.
Who would ever think that that a cult would get a lot of rich and famous people like Travolta and Cruz to back them for their ridiculous idea?
Who knows? Two of the people who joined up were her name was Catherine Oxenberg, who starred on Dynasty, and her daughter India Oxenberg. Catherine only drank so much of the Kool-Aid.
Well, you want to know
India drank gallons of the shit.
Well, you want to know something about Catherine Oxenberg? She was married to Johnny Rico in Starship Troopers.
She was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Casper Van Dien.
He was like her second husband.
Yeah.
Trophy husband.
Yeah.
She was also the daughter of the princess of
Oxlandia.
Yugoslavia or Botswana, some damn place. Some bizarre country. But yeah, they joined together. Catherine only drank so much of the Kool-Aid. India drank it all. And this was a masterful job of manipulation. Looking at it objectively, this was an absolute masterful job of manipulation. They would tell people from the get-go that there were going to be moments in these sessions that would make them feel uncomfortable and make them want to bolt. And they said, this is perfectly natural. It's perfectly natural. When it happens, just talk to one of our counselors. And the counselor's job was to talk them off the ledge. So when people's minds started, calling bullshit on this stuff, they would go talk to the counselors, and the counselors would talk them out of it. So slowly but surely, in degrees, they were coerced into deeper, and deeper rabbit holes, to the point where India Ostenberg got involved in a splinter organization called DOS, DOS, the same as the operating system. Now, mind you, Rainier was a self-styled celibate. He claimed to be celibate. He was lying, because the women, and they were all women who belonged to DOS, became his sex slaves, to the point where they even got branded. They were told that the brands were some kind of hippy-dippy symbol that was like growth or happiness or something. But what it actually was Keith Rainier's initials turned sideways. That's
They
what
told
the
him-
brand was.
They told him at the beginning. They told him at the beginning, from what I read, that it was supposed to be a tattoo.
Yeah.
And then when they got there, it was not a tattoo.
No, it was they were branded with a soldering iron.
Might as well have been an eggplant for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh,
where
yeah.
they were branded at
yeah, right above the holiest of
doesn't matter.
holies.
Branding it.
A soldering iron. I mean, it wasn't just like a regular brand. Oh,
And it took like 45 minutes to do the whole thing.
oh,
That's-
jeez.
They were held down, no anesthesia.
Yeah.
They were held down and branded, and they did it willingly.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they were. Now, to get to this point, to actually learn the secret of DOS, which was supposed to take them to this next level of what, I have no idea, but this next level that they were going to, improve themselves so much by going to this next level that they would break through all of the things that were stopping them from success. To get to this next level, they first had to give what was called collateral, just to be let in on the secret. What collateral was essentially they gave these people stuff they could use to blackmail them with. It was compromising photographs. It was secrets about the family. It was, various other things that you wouldn't want put out in public.
My browser history.
Your browser history, yeah. Well, the CIA and the NSA already knows about that.
Yeah, that's true.
And any FOIA request would any public information request would, I'm sure, come up with your browser history. Yeah, after waiting 7 to 10 years, naturally. But yeah, so they gave away the mechanism to blackmail themselves with. And one of the key people in that was Allison Mack. She was one of the, there was like it was a tiered, essentially it was another Ponzi scheme. It's a pyramid scheme with Rainier, of course, at the top. Long story short, he finally got busted, and it happened because Catherine Ostenberg wouldn't let it go. She knew her daughter was in too deep, that this was bad, that there was some evil shit going on, and so she just kept at it and kept at it. First, she went to the New York Times and told them about it, and nothing happened. So she started going on talk shows, and she just kept going and kept going and kept going. Well, unbeknownst to her, the New York Times article got the interest of the FBI, and the FBI had already started investigating it. They finally stepped in and arrested the guy. And here's the list of charges. This is ridiculous. This is interesting. It was racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, attempted sex trafficking conspiracy, forced labor conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy. That's what he was indicted with. He was, after a 6-week trial, it took the jury all of 4 hours to convict him on every count.
Wow.
They nailed that son of a bitch to a wall. He got 120 years. Now, I'm on mixed feelings about the rest of this, because Allison Mack, who was up to her eyeballs in it, got 3 years. The Seagram's heiress, who was doing the principal bankroller of it, got like 72 months or 48 months or something like that. The woman who helped Rainier start ESP, Nexium, got like 2 years, 3 years, something like that. It was a slap on the wrist compared to what Rainier got. I suppose, with the exception of the woman who helped start it, I suppose an argument could be made that the other people involved were coerced. Because obviously he was guilty of coercion, which I don't think at the time, and maybe even still, was against the law, or they didn't have a law about it. And Susan's internet crapped out, so I guess she's gone.
Yeah.
Apparently you just tagged Dan Allen and he's gone. But that's Nexia. And that one I think disturbed me almost more than any but the last one that I have keyed up. But that was it was a systematic stripping away of their individuality, and it's coercion into his sick fantasy of having a harem of sex slaves.
Seems like all these cults devolve into either that or pedophilia, or murder, or all of them,
Except for Heaven's Gate, and that was just wackadoodles.
Yeah.
They might as well have been going after the great spaghetti monster. But
come on, we all know that thing in the tail of the Aesop comet was a giant spaceship filled with vampires.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Any day now, Scott. Any day now.
Mm-hmm. And the alien lizard people who apparently were responsible for Pizzagate also came down in the same spacecraft. They just kind of like tagged out.
Well, yeah, they're in that new airport down below they built in Colorado.
Right, of course, naturally.
But it's sad, before we get to the last one, you know what also I see cultish is these TV evangelists. And I'm not talking the famous preachers. I'm talking the guy like, remember Tilden?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
The guy that he'd go on and he'd fake cry, and he told the story about how he needed money for medical operations because he was crying so much reading the letters that it melted the ink and it got into his skin and he was suffering from poisoning. And a reporter did the story. And when they went through the dumpster out back, they found a whole bunch of letters unopened, opened, but nothing was read. The money and the checks were taken out. The rest was just thrown away. It's the same thing. It's people who should be rational, so desperate for something that they can't find in a normal society, that they're willing to give up all their money, their Social Security checks, for that chance of grabbing the ring as it goes by.
Yeah.
Now it's part of the human condition.
Yeah.
To have empty spots in our psyche.
Yes.
The old cliche about apparently Susan's back, I think, or trying to be back. It's a blank screen at the moment, but there she is. But the old cliche about oh, my family is dysfunctional. Well, whose family isn't? Life itself is a, excuse my language, mind fuck. It always has been.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, this occurred to me while I was researching this. All of these cults essentially use the same concept as the military uses in boot camp. No, it's true. What the military does is they tear you down. And they tear you down and strip away everything that makes you an individual. At the same time they're doing that, they build you back up again as part of a team. The difference between what the military does and what these cults do is that once boot camp's over, it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's you've got the military discipline and all this, but it's nothing like the rest of these cults. But it's that same basic idea. You're stripped down, they tear away the individual stuff, and then they build you back up in a different image.
Susan,
you want to be an individual, son?
Susan, Allen, and I are not saying that the military. We're not saying the military is a cult. All emails should be directed to Jeff Thompson at StreamYard.com.
No, it absolutely
no, I know, but I know what you're saying.
It absolutely isn't a cult, but it's
Just put an eggplant emoji on them when you sing.
That's right. That's right.
Some servers have bigger eggplants than others.
Though, because that's how all brainwashing is.
Well,
That's all brainwashing. Basically, that's what they do. They brainwash you up. They take a certain person, they tear you down, they find your weakness, and they tear you down, and you have to build it back up.
Well, yeah, but it's not
Essentially.
prolonged.
Yeah.
And
when you're in it,
that's what I'm saying.
when you're in it, you're kind of like, I hate this, but I'm going to do it. It's not like, there's some guys and gals that get in there and they're probably like, yeah. But when you're in it, you're like, holy crap, I can't wait till this is over.
Yeah, exactly.
But now, Jeff and Alan, my father said the same thing, but he also said the minute he was out of boot camp, it was the best 8 weeks of his life. Did you guys look back on it fondly?
Oh, I do.
I
do. I wouldn't want to do it again.
No, but
I look back on it and I remember that I thought it was pretty damn hilarious, even at the time, because there was one particular time, and mind you, this was a mind fuck. It was a 9-week-long mind fuck. That was the whole purpose behind boot camp. And there was one point where, while we were in classes one day, the other company commanders and drill instructors went to our barracks and completely tore it to shreds. It was called White Tornado. So we got back from class that day, opened the doors, and I happened to be at the front of the line at that time. And everybody else around me was just stunned into silence. I started laughing my ass off because this was a work of art. Oh my God. The bunks were turned over, the mattresses and the blankets and the sheets were everywhere. There was laundry detergent spread all over the place. Everybody's lockers were ripped open. Everything was thrown out. It was magnificent. But what the military does, it makes sense. It forces these people who've grown up as totally narcissistic teenagers and turns them into a team that, in every sense of the word, they're part of that team. And the reason.
Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, it gives you self-esteem when you're out. You felt like you've accomplished something.
Yes. You know? Yes, exactly. But the basic idea behind it is that they know the worst case scenario for everybody in the military is you get sent into combat. Combat is something that nobody in their right mind wants to go to. Nobody wants to get shot at. Nobody wants to get blown up. That just it. But they do it, and they do it willingly. And you hear, if you read, I've got all sorts of historical books about war and battles, and every single one of them points out this one simple fact: is the people who fight, the soldiers on the ground who do the actual fighting, aren't doing it for a flag. They're not doing it because somebody ordered to do it. They're doing it to protect their buddies. Somebody who throws themselves on a grenade doesn't do it for a flag. They do it to save their buddy's life.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. That's what military training is all. It gets you are part of this team. This team is everything to you. And I'll tell you this right now, there were people that I did not like at all when I was in the military, but if I saw them on the street and somebody was hassling them, I'd be at their back the whole time in an instant. I wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah. And
there's something about being in the military that the people that you serve with, the people that you work with, you are theirs.
Yeah.
They are your brothers and sisters.
Definitely.
Till the day you die.
I used to see that my father would walk up to a car with, that had a Marine emblem, and him and the guy would talk like they were best friends, and they'd never met each other before. Yep. But they were Marines, so they were family.
Yeah, Marines it's a crazy bond those guys have, whether they were in combat or not combat. Yeah. It's a crazy bond, and like you said, your dad, talking to another devil dog that he never met, and they're just like two peas in a pod. It's crazy.
Yeah,
I mean it's a cool brother,
but
it's a relationship that nobody who's never been through it could ever understand.
Yeah,
but then again, an actual cult is something completely different. And here's the example. This is the one that had made me the most sick. I love research. I'm weird that way. I mean, I can and have binge watch documentaries all day long, from just skipping from one completely unrelated subject to another. I love it. But researching this thing was dark. I mean, dark. And this particular one was the darkest of it. It's called The Children of God.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
That's horrible.
Started by a guy named David Berg, who he was a pedophile and sexual predator. He rescinded the 10 Commandments, and the 10 Commandments didn't apply to them anymore. Called himself God, and so everything he said was the word of God. And he said that children were born to enjoy sex. Children were raised in this church from birth and indoctrinated to enjoy sex, not just in general, with their parents, with their nannies, with David Berg.
Now, is he the one that they had the illustrated leaflets and all that stuff? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he issued illustrated pamphlets that looked like swingers magazines.
Yeah. And
they extolled the virtues of intergenerational sex. This is some sick shit. And the indoctrination was so powerful that even after he died, it kept going. It kept going. In fact, it still exists.
Really?
I watched one documentary that was created by a kid who grew up in the group and then escaped it when he was like 16, 18, somewhere in there. And a bunch of his brothers escaped with him. And he took a road trip from the U.S. down through South America, finally ending up in Brazil, where the family spent a lot, the cult spent a lot of time living in Brazil. His mother wouldn't even meet with him. He could barely get her to talk to him on the phone. And one of the things that were part of these sex pamphlets was this thing called flirty fishing. It was the way that they sustained themselves. Is the women would go out, flirt with men, have sex with them, get money from them, and bring it back to the church. And that was not only sanctioned, it was required. And this kid's mother, because she was still doing it. I mean, we're talking more than a decade after David Berg died. They're still doing it. They're still flirty fishing to make money for the church.
Now, I saw a documentary, I don't know if it's the same one, but they had several of the kids that had grown up in there, and they had escaped and stuff, and they were trying to get their lives back on track and stuff. It's pretty horrible. Now, is that the one where his son killed his
son? Well, no, his son, David Dito, he was like the poster child,
right,
for this church, for this cult. He was raised as the poster child for this cult. And everybody knew when he had sex with adults and with everybody else. He was raised this way in public. Everybody knew about it. He finally escaped the cult and finally became so disgusted by what he'd had to do as a child, by how truly dysfunctional his family was, that he decided he was going to find his mother, take her prisoner, torture her, and kill her. He didn't find his mother, so he grabbed his nanny instead and did it to her. And then he fled the scene, and an hour later put a bullet into his own brain. Yeah.
So the head of this group died peacefully in his bed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, is it because they were in Brazil and we couldn't get to them?
I don't know.
That I don't.
I mean, I'd hate to think this is going on in the United States and, we're sitting around doing nothing.
It started here. And I mean, they had didn't they do music recordings and stuff like that? I mean, it's crazy. You should check out the documentary on that.
Children of the Sun?
Of God. Children of God.
Children of God, sorry.
Children of God.
Really, it's huge.
Okay.
I never heard of it till my wife and I watched the documentary. It's crazy.
And this, man, my soul hurt watching this stuff. And I'm as jaded and cynical as they come. But man, this was a rabbit hole I really did not want to go down, man.
Yeah. It's interesting, but it's hard to watch.
Oh, man.
Because you're just like amazed by everything that went on.
Now that is true horror.
Yeah.
That is true. I've toyed with the idea of a story about this group of 6 girls who were raised exactly the same way, though not with the religious connotations. But they were raised to be sex toys, and they eventually escape, and there's a lot of killing that's going on, and it's an actual horror story, but it's too damn dark. I can't write it. It's too dark.
Adults are one thing. Kids are a whole another.
I know.
I mean, adults, it's horrible. And kids, it's just a tragedy.
Oh, yeah. How you can, I mean, that's something I've never understood. I mean, as Victorian as our public discourse about sex is. Because, I mean, sex is the one thing everybody has, but nobody talks about. It's, I mean, you can have 87 killings in a movie, but you turn naked boobs in there, and that's it, X-rated, NC-17. Somehow sex is worse than gratuitous violence.
Well, gratuitous boobs lead to violence.
It never has with me, but maybe I'm just weird. I don't know. But I mean, so we have this Victorian idea, but essentially, in spite of all that, it's pretty open. You can do pretty much anything you want, as long as everybody involved is both consenting and adult. Between consenting adults, you're not hurting anybody, go for it. Just do whatever. I don't care. If you're into midget lesbians wrestling in lime jello, go for it. Doesn't really do anything for me, but
there's probably a cult out there for that.
Probably is.
I'll send you the link to the website.
Yeah, Mr. Tentacle Sex. But I mean, so it seems to me it would be easy. Keep kids out of it. Keep animals out of it. Stick with their own species. It shouldn't be that hard, but apparently, what do I know? It's just so sick.
Well, you wrap it up in a cult, you give it a religious veneer to it, and it's hard for the authorities. I mean, look at the only reason Scientology is considered a religion is that every time some city or some state tried to tax them, they'd get dozens of lawyers to bring hundreds of cases around the country. And finally, the state, local, federal government just said, fuck it, we don't have the time and the money to deal with this. You're a religion. Get out of our hair.
Yeah.
And I could see them doing the same thing with this. And
well,
at what point can the police not step in? How badly are their hands tied?
It's religious freedom.
Yeah.
It's religious freedom. You are allowed to believe whatever you damn
right, but I'm talking about the children aspect of it. How?
Well, yeah. Whenever they find out about it, they bust people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember there was a court case in Florida. This young woman was arrested for prostitution, and she denied it. she said that it was religious activities, that she was the minister of her religion, that sex was part of the communion, rather than take the body of wine, the blood of wine, you took,
her body,
the woman of wine, and that they weren't paying her for sex, they were tithing her. So, I think it was a great ploy. She lost the case, but if I was the judge, I would have said, okay, dismissed. Good one.
But with the exception of Heaven's Gate, again, all of these things started out relatively benign.
Yeah.
And I think it's the ultimate proof that absolute power corrupts absolutely. Because these individuals, the David Koresh, the David Berg, the Rainier, right? Yeah, those guys all got into a position. Jim Jones got into a position where they had absolute power.
Yeah.
They could make these people do whatever they damn well pleased. And human nature, eventually they did. You throw in, a narcissistic personality or a sociopath, or all of a sudden, gimme, I'll take it. And it's, I don't know. But again, if we tried to write this shit,
oh yeah,
that's fiction, nobody'd believe it.
No.
Yep.
Nobody would believe it. But it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, that to me is the scariest part of it.
There are so many cults out there. It's amazing.
Yeah. And the sad part about it is that nobody ever really talks about you. We all even here, we focused in on the leaders. We focused in on the big celebrities. Are so many people who are so disillusioned with their lives, with themselves. Mm-hmm. How many millions of people are following this cult because it's the only thing they have in their poor lives?
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to do anything but watch the news. And you see it every day.
Yeah.
Every day. People you would think were rational who just, how are you buying this shit? Why is your bullshit meter not redlining right now?
Yeah.
Susan?
It's like that man that killed. It's like that man that killed his 2 children a couple weeks ago that I told you about. They killed him with the spear gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he was a member of a cult. QAnon. That's who he was following. And it started slowly, so that his wife didn't notice the progression. And even when he went with the children away from home, that was not unusual because he spent a lot of time with his children. He was always real active and loving and what you would expect a father to be. And she said after the fact, she thought about it and realized that there were certain little things that she noticed was different in how he spoke about what the man QAnon told him, instead of just he heard, but it was like he was actually speaking to him at that time. And he took his 2 children out, and one was like 3 or 4 years old, and the other one was a toddler, and he killed them with a spear gun. And the youngest one didn't die immediately, so he shot it repeatedly until he died. Dumped them in a ditch and covered them up with their own blankets. And he admitted he did it because he was told that his wife had been something was wrong with the genetics, that and when they were born, they were infected.
Alien lizard. That was the alien lizard.
Alien lineage. He had to kill them in order to kill it, and he did. He killed his babies. And that happened, the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's a case of screwed up people do screwed up things. If there hadn't been QAnon, something else would have set the guy off.
Yeah.
But there's also, every last one of us knows somebody who's lost. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People who just don't, for whom life just doesn't really work. You know, it could be a relative, a cousin or something. It could be some guy you know from work. It could be a friend of yours from back in the day. We all know somebody who's one of those lost souls. And those lost souls sometimes meet up with people like a David Koresh, like a Jim Jones, like a Keith Raniere, like a Charles Manson. And he gives them a direction. He gives them what they think they're looking for.
Yeah, because they'll work at a restaurant.
Go ahead, Alan.
Oh, they'll work at a restaurant and give all their wages to the cult, where else they wouldn't have worked at a restaurant, you know, before. Or if they did, the money would go to them and they could, you know, live their life. But instead, they'll do slave labor for nothing. Maybe, you know, maybe 3 meals, maybe 2 meals a day, whatever the cult's providing. So, like Scott was saying, these people are just, you know, missing something in their life, and this is just fulfilling it.
Yep. That's about the only
I was
explanation
reading from a psychologist.
Go ahead.
One
of the psychologists says where they do that too. They bring them in, the ones who need this attention, this love, the support, their whatever it is that they don't have in their home. They figure out their weakness and they bring them in, and then they shower them with all this affection and love and supportive until they're there. They're, you know, they've got them at that point in time, similar to the way that the military does. You know, they treat them and they constantly bombard them with what the military wants them to know, and they do them the same way. And then once they're there, that's all they know anymore. They don't know. They knew what they had.
Yeah.
What they've got now is terrible. But, you know, a lot of them can't get out.
Again, the difference is in the cults, they make them cut all ties with their families.
Right.
They make them leave behind their life. Even Heaven's Gate.
That is their
Yeah, even Heaven's Gate did that. They told them just leave everything in your life behind without a word and come with us.
Yeah. The military encourages family ties. They want you to have that support system.
Except that first day at
that's the
boot
big
camp where
difference.
they say your families will never see you again. Pack
Your
your belongings.
mama's not here anymore.
I was
Write a
contemplating
letter. My father was told, write a letter to your mother. This will be the last she ever hears of you.
I was constipated for a week.
Ladies, gentlemen, I have to take off. It's 10:30.
Yep.
We had a great show tonight. I had a great time. Glad I could make it.
Thank you for joining us.
Good seeing you, Scott.
Yep, and I will talk to you all soon.
Yes,
All right.
you will.
Ciao.
Ciao. Yeah, so somebody tell a joke. Let's end this on a happy note, damn it.
You don't want to be the latrine cleaner after the first week of boot camp. You don't want to have latrine duty.
No.
How's that?
Did they really call y'all bad names?
Oh, yeah.
hell
When
yeah.
you were in camp?
Yeah.
Yeah, my company
Tell me
commander's
some.
favorite
That's-
was hammered slug shit. That was his favorite one. He called us hammered slug shit all the time.
I can't remember, but I do remember, yeah. But I can't remember anything in particular.
Yeah, one thing the military teaches you how to do is swear.
Yeah, they do.
They raise it to an art form.
They do.
No,
But now,
really good lessons.
yeah, no, I wouldn't do it again, but I'm glad I did it.
Yeah,
I mean, boot
I
camp,
don't regret doing it.
No, I
But
don't.
you know, honestly, I think and this isn't necessarily a popular opinion, but I honestly think that every kid coming out of high school should be required to give 2 years of public service.
I agree.
Not necessarily the military, but some kind of public service. For one very simple reason. It teaches you discipline.
Yes.
And it gets you out of that narcissistic mindset. Because every teenager is a narcissist.
Oh, yeah.
Every last one. I was a huge narcissist when I was a teenager.
Oh, yeah.
I know it.
Yeah. Well, you know, either the military or the conservation corps or something.
Something.
Fire, you know, firefighting, whatever.
Yeah, do I mean, yeah, work in the library. Do, you know, whatever. Do
But
something
where you have to get up in the morning. You got to get up early. You got to make your bed. You got to clean yourself, you know, and come home and do the same thing before you go to bed. Clean yourself, you know.
Yep.
Because people these days, they don't, you know. They don't.
That's true.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, even
I see quite a few of those now. Yeah.
This was a cliche when I went through, but you know, well, back in the old guard. But the fact of the matter was, when I went through boot camp, I mean, I'm sure everybody's familiar with Full Metal Jacket. I watched that with my father, who was in the Army during Korea. He was a cannon cocker. He ended up not going overseas. He ended up staying in Fort Bliss, Texas, and training other people in cannon cocking. Apparently, he was really good at it. And then somehow became a jazz DJ. I don't know exactly how that happened.
What?
That's another story. But we were watching it together, and he said, my boot camp wasn't that bad. I'm like, Dad, that is my boot camp. The only difference between what they went through in that movie and what I went through is that they couldn't hit us in the face. That was the only difference. Everything else was the same.
They couldn't hit us. Now, my cousins went through the Marines same time I went through the Air Force, and they stepped on their backs in mud. I mean, they put their hands on them. I don't know if they necessarily hit them, but yeah, my cousins say, yeah, they put their hands on us, man. You know, and nowadays the military is not like that.
Yeah, well, yeah. When I went through, there was a small brick building at one end of the compound that was called the Junior Officer of the Day Shack, JOOD Shack. It's where people stood watch, because you're always standing watches.
Yeah.
There. But it's a small brick building, and they would bring us over to this building to train us on various things, saluting and just, you know, basic stuff. And if they didn't like the way you were doing it, they would slam you up against that brick wall.
Get your attention, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of bruises, but no facial injuries.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they exercised us into pain. Exercising wasn't for physical fitness. It was for discipline.
It's for pain, man.
Oh, yes.
The upright position sucked.
Yeah, they called it the thinking position. You squat, put your arms out, and you stay in that position.
You're thinking, why am I here?
Oh, yes. Another favorite of his was doing push-ups. He'd go down, up, down, up, down.
Yeah.
And you had to stay that way.
Yeah.
And everybody's arms are just like shaking. Like mad.
Yeah. Yep. I hated that.
Oh, yeah. That had nothing. There was nothing about that was about fitness. Nothing.
Nope. You feel the pain of Uncle Sam.
Yeah. I mean, the first night, the night we met our company commander, he said flat out, he said, people, I am a fucking sadist. And then he spent 9 weeks proving it to us. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But when you got out of boot camp, you kept your eyes open and your mouth shut.
Yeah.
Well, several years go by and it gets kinder and gentler, and they stop doing some of that stuff. And the kids that were coming out of boot camp were the mouthiest, most opinionated. They all had all the answers, and you couldn't teach them anything. So there's something to be said about that style of training.
There is. If you can't make it, then you don't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
They're not asking a whole lot of you, really. I didn't feel that way. I felt if I can make it through boot camp, anybody can make it through boot camp. That's how I felt at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah. I was a long-haired hippie weirdo freak, man.
Yeah. I was like, I made it. I graduated. Holy shit. I fooled these guys.
Oh, I got to the end of boot camp. We were at our company party at the end of it all. And I went up to thank my company commander and say goodbye. And he didn't even know who I was.
That's a good thing.
That is a fully successful boot camp.
Yeah.
Not to the end of it, he didn't know who I was.
No, that's a good thing. So when they know who you are,
that's bad. That's bad.
You don't want to drop in. Yeah, no, I hear now you have timeout cards and crap like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I don't think that's a good thing. I really don't. But
what's a timeout card for?
If you get too stressed out, you hand them a card.
Timeout.
And they give you a timeout. Yeah.
Which is
one of those.
Huh? Yeah.
I said everybody needs one of those.
Yeah. We all could.
That's right.
Yeah. And the thing is, it doesn't matter what branch of service you go in. It doesn't matter whether it's peacetime or wartime. You are asked to do some truly crazy shit.
Mm-hmm.
You just are. That's the nature of the job. So they have to have a way to weed out the ones that simply can't take it. And some people can't.
No, and it's nothing against that person. It's just not their thing.
Yeah.
And so you're putting somebody in that probably shouldn't be in.
Right.
And it's crazy.
Is it the mental discipline? That's what they can't handle is the mental discipline and the stress. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes the PT sometimes, but you do have to qualify with PT somehow. So
they gave us a fitness test. We had to do a certain amount of push-ups, pull-ups, and jumping jacks and sit-ups and that sort of stuff. But I had to prove that we could swim.
See, we didn't. We had to prove we could fly.
And if you didn't fly high enough, they propelled you with their boot.
That's right. We aimed high. Oh man, I don't know. Hey, I gotta go, folks. I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I came in late. It's been a crazy day, and I'm glad I could make it. So
you up for Friday?
Yes.
Yes. Friday in the podcast, in search of a blood rabbit hole, we will be covering Doctor Who.
Who?
Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. That won't be dark at all.
No, that'll be a good time.
It's a kid's show that's really scary, but that'll be a good time. Please join us for that. I will be posting this on YouTube, so if you see it, hit like and subscribe so we can get our own YouTube channel. And just thanks to everybody that showed up. We didn't get a lot of comments because it's really dark, and I'm not surprised we didn't get a lot of comments.
Yeah.
But thanks to everybody who watched, and thanks to everybody who's going to watch. And go ahead.
Where's this posted to on YouTube?
It is.
What channel is it posted to on YouTube?
I'll send the link out. I'll put the link out. There will be a link to it. It should be up in about an hour or so.
Cool. I'll catch the beginning.
Know how to find you.
Okay. Londa Saldana said thanks. Thank you for sticking all the way through this. It was dark, and this couldn't have been a fun one to listen to. But thanks, everybody, and we will see you next time.
All right. Good night, you two. Thank you.
Take it easy,
everybody watching.
Bye, y'all.